So patch 14.1, or the brand new patch that's coming out to the live servers, is hitting the servers, well, today. I mean, by the time you're watching this video, it's today. I mean, I'm filming this yesterday, right? It's Tuesday, January 9th, at the time of recording this video. But tomorrow, January 10th, everything is hitting the live servers. Now, I normally would not post a VOD review of a game right before the new patch hits, right? But this one's a little different because today's VOD is already on the new patch. Because the patch is so egregiously large, a lot of top players have actually been already starting to prep on the PvE to try to get a feel for the new patch, because it's going to take so much time to get used to everything. And one of these top players, and actually crazy enough, it's actually Froden. So Froden is actually playing on the new patch. He's been streaming his PvE in-house lobbies, and I thought this would be a great opportunity to look into some gameplay on the new patch and see what's going on, because especially in this game in particular, we are watching a very interesting game, a very interesting choice in a reroll composition, something we have not ever really seen the entirety of the set. Maybe a little bit in the PvE, maybe within the first day or two, but besides that, not really. Anyways, going in, we are inside of Crab Rave, a brand new portal that has come to the set for this current patch. There's a bunch of new portals as well. I think I forgot to mention that at the beginning when I'm talking about the patch rundown and the new patch. But Crab Rave, for those of you who don't know what it is, it's just Scuttle Puddle. The only difference though is that starting from stage 5, neutrals is actually hard. So you actually need to build a board that's strong to beat it, because apparently it seems to be way too strong and some players are actually struggling to clear it sometimes. So keep that in mind. It's a very different thing, a very different take into TFT, something we've not really seen before. So just bear in mind, if you see the large crab later down the line, I'll definitely point it out for you. You'll definitely notice it. Anyways, going into here, we have looks like we pick up the the mosher Vi chosen from our shop. Not something you would ever really see anybody really settle for unless they had a really strong mosher opener, which I guess Froden kind of does. But he is already deciding to pick it up. He's playing 4 Vi's here, and whenever you're already playing 4 of a 1 cost, you're already maybe potentially thinking about re-rolling it. And if you have the audio, if you're listening very, very closely, you might be able to hear him, although I highly doubt it. He is very quiet. I can't think when people are talking in my ear at the same time. But he's already mentioned, he's thinking about Vi reroll. Not something that you see pretty common. So he's going to be looking at his augments here: Salvage Bin, Ascension, and Three's Company. And out of these augment choices, Three's Company makes the most sense, right? Three's Company is sort of one of those augments that's like, it's not great, but Ascension and Salvage Bin. Salvage Bin can be great in the right scenarios, and actually, it's probably Salvage Bin, actually, now that I'm thinking about it, if you are trying to play a little more seriously. Salvage Bin might be a little better in this scenario. You get a Tempo Slam, maybe something like a Ginsu's, but Three's Company is totally fine as well. These are probably the 2 main options. But I will say this, Froden is playing on the PvE. There are no stakes. So for him, he's just like, hey, whatever the fuck works best for Vi, I'm not going to take Salvage Bin. I'm never selling this Vi. And Three's Company, kind of shit in this scenario. This augment's basically just 12 gold for me, and I'm not trying to econ right now and play like a, a very strong late game board, not trying to tempo economy. So none of these really make sense in his certain spot. So he's gonna reroll, gets learning to spell. Not that great because Vi's AP scaling doesn't do much, just increases the sunder. Trade sector does pop up, which is pretty interesting, and Jeweled Lotus. Jeweled Lotus never that great at 2-1, so we do end up taking Trade Sector, which has a pretty interesting synergy with Punk. Basically, you get the Trade Sector reroll first, and then you get the Punk reroll after. So you basically get 2 rolls per turn for the cost of 1 gold. Now, obviously, the Trade Sector rolls, they don't cost any money, so they don't actually give you the extra stats when you're playing Punk. So that's why when you play Punk, you don't want to take things like Golden Ticket, you don't want to take things like Prismatic Ticket, Silver Ticket, right? It doesn't make sense because those free rolls don't actually give you bonus stats. You're just rolling just to get the rolls. So it's a little inefficient in that sense. But anyways, already sitting on 6 Vi's, and this is pretty interesting. It's kind of weird that we're seeing Vi being rerolled, and you might be thinking like, oh, Vi reroll, like if we're playing Vi reroll, like surely it's just like our main thing and we're just playing Jinx Punk, like who gives a shit? Not exactly. In this game in particular, as a bit of a spoiler, Froden is specifically thinking about Vi carry. Now, Vi carry is not something I've really heard of before. It's something that was semi-prevalent in set 8. If you remember, with Underground and with Hero Augments, you could turn Vi into a carry, and that was sort of like a way you could approach the Vi carry comp. This set's Vi is a really similar reprint to set 8, but if you remember anything about set 8, Vi's itemizations was stuff like BT, Titans, etc. But in this set, in set 10 in particular, it's not really something. I think that's what everyone's like default right now, their heuristics. But as we'll soon see later down the line, Vi is actually going to be dishing out a lot of damage. So we're actually going to be looking for itemizations like IE, like Hodge, and interestingly enough, QSS has been a bit of the talk of the town as a potential like BIS for Vi. Now, again, like I said before, this is like, I think this is Frodance. If the top left says anything, I mean, my face is top left, but you can't see it behind it. But he's already played 5 games with PB. This is the 6th. So I'm assuming he doesn't really know what the itemization is just yet. And just based off watching this game, I think people are sort of leaning more towards IE Hodge QSS, but I think he's leaning more towards BT Titans, at least for this part of the game. Titans is not that ideal on Vi. It is your super fan item, but it's not ideal in the sense that like Titans, you don't get a lot of value out of the AP. Again, it does increase her armor shred by like a slight margin, but it's almost like a no diff. So Titans, it's fine. It was great in set 8, not that great in set 10. So again, IE Hodge QSS is sort of the itemization that we're looking for. But anyways, making 30 gold, we are already sitting on 8 Vi, so we're very close to this Vi 3. We are like 1 Vi away. Gonna slow roll on level 4 before 3-1, or sorry, before 3-2 to try to hit that Vi 3, and then we're gonna see where we go from there. Now, you might be wondering, okay, so we understand the game plan, right? The game plan is Vi 3. How the fuck are we gonna play around Vi 3, right? Her traits are Punk, and her traits are Mosher. So, what works? What doesn't work, and what works? So you can either play vertically in Punk, which in case you haven't already noticed, he's playing a lot of moshers. He's not holding a lot of punkiness, so that's really out of the question. So Frodance is actually going to lean towards vertical moshers. Pretty interesting. Vertical moshers it's one of those compositions that surprisingly enough is actually kind of strong even in the current patch, but it's not a comp that you cap out with. It's a board that you play at level 8 most of the times, and it's a board that lets you get to level 9 and then you pivot out of it if you happen to find yourself with a lot of moshers. It's not a very common line that you play, and funny enough, it's actually a line that only somebody like Joe Bookmark is really like a fucking sucker for. I remember like the very beginning of set 10, this guy wouldn't shut up about the poppers, so he wants to play the poppers or the country crowd. But in this game instead, vertical moshers is actually looking pretty promising. Even some people are willing to play moshers in the early game, especially if you have 4 mosher like very early on. Things like Vi Chosen that gives you the +2, and then you just play like Set and like a Jax, and your board is actually decently pretty stable. Or not Jax, sorry, an Urgot. Urgot is very strong during stage 2. But anyways, Blinding Speed, Final Reserves, Cursed Crown, none of these augments are great at all. None of them make any sense whatsoever. To be honest, I don't even know what I would be. I would definitely roll middle first, and I'd probably reroll Cursed Crown. None of these really make that much sense, and I'd be really sad to take Blinding Speed. He rerolls the right side. This all sucks. He does reroll the Blinding Speed here, though. I don't know if I fully agree with this take, only because you do get like double Ginsu's plus like red buff, and then maybe there's some sort of a line with like Sona or something you can play later, and you just tempo with Blinding Speed. I don't think it's great by any means. You do need the items on Sona, so I guess if he missed here, he probably takes Tiny's Titan, but Jewel Lotus is definitely acceptable in this spot, so that is what we end up taking. A very difficult decision to be making. It kind of sucks that all these augments are so terrible, but he did roll because his other 2 augments were just so bad. He might as well just roll and see what he finds, and honestly, I can get behind that. He does sign the GS here onto the Vi here as well, because he does need to find some level of itemization onto this Vi, but now we're sitting at like rod tier, so our neutrals drops was pretty unfortunate, getting so much AP, and we have to really think about like, okay, like what can we do to try and kill these AP components. And to be completely honest with you, inside of moshers, there's not much that you can do. In case you aren't aware, inside of the vertical mosher trait, the 2 units that actually share traits are, I believe it is Gnar and it is Yorick, because not only are they moshers, but they're also pentakill, if you get my drift. So pentakill is a pretty common sort of secondary trait that you want to be able to get into your board, because 1, it not only does it fit so well onto the board, but 2, it buffs your whole team, especially in the late game. But so Frodance actually, funny enough, he pivots into Superfan here because he knows he's lacking items, so he uses Superfan to get the 3rd item, and then once he finds the 3rd item, he can tech out of it. Really smart decision making. I like that a lot. But going in here, we're rod tier. It's fucking terrible. Probably get a Crown Guard. Maybe Morello's is nice because we can get maybe some level of anti-heal onto our board. Morello's, it did get buffed in the new patch. I can't remember exactly what it does, but I know it did get buffed, so maybe it doesn't feel as bad to be slamming it. I'm still not sure, but definitely Crown Guard is the way to go here. We are slamming it on Pantheon. It's an okay item on him. It's just a generic tank item. It's not great, but quite honestly, how else are we going to kill the rods, right? But anyways, sitting here, 4 Mosher, 3 Guardian, 3 Superfan, and the board is like not as solid as you'd expect it to be. You know what I mean? Like, look at the streak right now. We are win, lose, win, win. Or, yeah, we're winning. So, you know, it's kind of weird because typically when you're playing around a one-cost reroll, you're sort of streaking the entirety of a stage for free, right? And maybe the fight RNG on 3-2 was a little bit rough, but nonetheless, this is a little bit of an awkward spot to be in when playing a one-cost reroll. Again, think about like Annie 3, for example. Annie 3 has been tempo used throughout stage 3, like no problem. Even into stage 4 a little bit, you're kind of chilling for a little bit until people start spiking on 4-2, and that's when you start to run into some issues. Here, instead though, Vi does struggle a lot and does get CC'd a lot, and that's kind of the big problem with Vi reroll. At least from what we've seen through a lot of these fights, Vi can, you know, dish out a lot of damage. Every time she casts, she's basically one-tapping a unit. This is 5.5k damage in a single fight. But even though she's able to one-tap units, she needs to cast. She needs to get there. And that's sort of the biggest problem with Vi right now. So when you're playing Vi, the QSS seems to be super, super vital, or at least an augment like Silver Veil does seem to be a very strong choice when playing this unit. It's very possible too, if you find like the Vi headliner and you hit Silver Veil at 2-1, it's very possible you could actually just run this line and actually be in a really, really good spot. Froden also does something pretty interesting here. He actually levels to 7 here before anything else. He pumps and then he decides to level. And we aren't Pantheon 3 yet, in case you haven't realized yet. We aren't Pantheon 3 yet, which I am not the biggest fan of, just because there's no real reason not to level to 7 and then not look for the Pantheon. There's still years that we can hit at 6 and I think it's fine. But I think what Froden's thinking is that, hey, I'm just one off. I'll eventually find it. There's no rush. And you know what? That's probably fine as well. I do think Pantheon 3 is quite an impactful buff on this board in particular. So, again, not the biggest fan that he pumped to 7 first, but I think it's okay. I'm not against it by any means, but nonetheless, I think he just wants to try to find some tempo and try to stabilize his board. Anyways, teaming up Infusion and Unified Resistance. It's probably Unified in the spot just right off rip. Teaming up does have better stats. The only issue is that you're not really playing around any 4 costs in particular. The big thing about this comp is that because we are playing vertical moshers, Yorick is the big ticket, our big out. If we can manage to get the Yorick, we should be in a much, much better spot. So teaming up is not really the way to go here. Infusion doesn't really make a lot of sense. Unified is great because we have a lot of healing, a lot of HP to be working with. So we do get a lot of value out of the armor. Three's company that we just hit, really, oh, sorry, Three's a crowd. Really great because Urgot and as well as Set are both 3 costs, which is really, really nice. We do get a little more of that bonus HP here, and actually Froden, wow, levels 8 here. Very aggressive, but I think he's realizing his board's falling off in power a lot, so he wants to spike ASAP and try to preserve HP, maybe play for top 4. But levels to 8 here, and quite honestly, right now, I'm kind of amazed that he took Unified. I think Three's a crowd's like slightly better in that spot, but it did get nerfed this patch, so maybe I'm just a little too used to the old patch and not really used to the new patch, especially because 3 Kyle got nerfed a little bit. Also, just to say, Unified also does make a lot of sense because again, a lot of the armor is being used really efficiently across the whole board, and we are frontlining basically everything, so it makes a lot of sense. I also, by the way, the positioning here is not also ideal. This vibe being right up in the center in the middle, very susceptible to getting targeted right off rip, can be a little scary. In general, when it comes to playing around melee carries, there are very few melee carries you're actually really satisfied with playing right up into the first row and taking aggro immediately. The only exceptions are usually units that like GA, things like Kiana and, you know, of the such. So this Vi in the front row, I'm not the biggest fan of it. I would like, if possible, like before, how do we hit the Pan 3 a little earlier? Obviously, you can't control your rolls, but how do we find a little earlier, maybe like 1 row back, right, putting it into the second row, and then trying to play around, you know, the Pantheon tanking everything first. Vi walks up right after. If you remember Darius' positioning from set, I believe set 9, at early set 9, by the way, not the 9.5, set 9, like a long time ago with Noxus reroll. You might remember the way that you position Darius along behind the main tank, and it's usually something like A6 and B7. So this is already a really interesting, you know, spot to be in. I don't really agree with the way that he's positioned the Vi, especially like the way that it gets focused down. It's dying so early on, but it is what it is. Looks like as well, let's see what our board is looking like. We do have the Morello on the Karthus. It's not the most ideal. Oh, Pantheon 3, perfect. But Karthus, not the most ideal. I actually think you can make an argument for putting Morello onto the Viego instead. Only because this Karthus, if it casts, then it'll proc, but it also takes forever because we don't have a mana generation item on him. So I actually like Morello on Viego better, especially because we have the remover. And we can think about Morello Viego, and then once we find that the Yorick, then we can just Morello the Yorick and just call it a day. So seems to be fine enough to me, but nonetheless, sorry, I just got a text on my phone. I thought it was important. I'm expecting an important message/phone call, but it hasn't hit yet. I don't know what's going on. But anyways, 4-7, we've lost the majority of stage 4, so, you know, this board, it's already starting to look a little doomed, right? We're struggling to beat out boards, and people are just continuously getting stronger. How do we cap out our board here? Well, luckily enough, we do find one Yorick here, which is already infinitely better for us. We can actually kill one of the tiers with a Hodge. Other tier is probably going to be a Redemption in this spot. It could also be double Hodge as well. Redemption works perfectly fine. You can put it onto the Pantheon here. Yeah, and then Hodge on the, yep, great. And then this is sort of going to be our board starting from stage 5. At this point, everyone's probably level 8. Everyone's probably pretty strong at this point. As you can see, our Vi is, again, struggling to clear units and has fallen off quite a cliff. So even though this is kind of like a new sort of composition you can consider, is it that strong? It's still up for debate. It definitely seems to cap out at level 8 from what I can tell. The Yorick too, actually, early on, super nice. We are 7 mosher, a little awkward here, but we can definitely drop the, I believe we can drop the Gnar for something else, a different pentakill unit, probably like Carthage or something. Not entirely sure. Or we can just drop a different mosher and then we just play something else, so that works as well. I don't really know who we drop. Maybe the crab? Maybe drop the crab for somebody else? I don't know. But, oh, interesting. He drops the Viego. Oh, no, it's probably, no, you drop Gnar for the Olaf, I think. And then you could potentially play this line with actually Olaf 3. So actually, funny enough, if you consider like Vi 3, Olaf 3, and like maybe like Lucky Gloves, that's a decision, right? Lucky Gloves 2-1 and you decide to play Olaf 5 reroll, like that could potentially work. They're connected via a set, but it does seem like a really possible board, especially because you can just cap out with the Yorick again in the end game, and it makes perfect sense. So as we can tell, it isn't the best, you know, presentation of the way to approach this line, but again, this is a very new line. We're still all learning the patch, so I think this is a really interesting approach, especially for a first time running the line. You're just going in dry, like perfectly acceptable. I think Foden overall, with the, you know, lack of understanding of this patch, not to say that he's a bad player, right? Like we all lack understanding. Nobody knows what the fuck is going on, right? But nonetheless, I still think he played this game very well and very creatively, I might add. But anyways, going here, Yorick 2, which is sort of the lifesaver, to be completely honest. We have the Gunblade, we have double healing on this Yorick, and as you can tell, double healing on Yorick is super fucking busted. I think his best itemizations are something like BT Titans, or sorry, it's like BT Starax or something like that. He really loves healing. Things like Hodge, things like BT, things like Gunblade. He's basically rocking like near Biss. Morello, in case you don't know why Morello is good on Yorick, all his ghouls apply the Morello buff. So by having the Yorick even just cast once, he's able to spread the Morello everywhere, and then we are chilling on like a very great Morello holder. You might see a lot of pro players, especially in the late game, put Morello on units like Yorick, but also units like Alawi for the same reason. They just smack the pinnacle smack down, spreads the Morello everywhere, and we are chilling with a really strong board. But anyways, by the way, that fight was fucking immaculate. Also, look at this thing. Look at this fucking thing. Look at the HP bar on that crab. It's fucking black. You can barely even tell it's supposed to be red. It's black. That's how many bars there are. Now, luckily, Foden's board is actually decently strong, so he's actually able to clear it pretty well. But you can tell, like, Foden was panicking. He was actually rolling down. He couldn't do it. Now, funny enough, this guy here died to the crab. He actually fucking died to the crab. And funny enough, you might have noticed his crab was in the corner in the top left. The reason that happened was because he had a Kiana on his board. And I think this is something you have to keep in mind for this board in particular. You might not want to have Kiana on your board for that specific fight. And the reason being is because Kiana will push the crab into the corner. Because, you know, it doesn't have an item. And what ends up happening is that the crab gets pushed into the corner. And if you're playing like 80 carries, let's say you're playing crowd divers, or you're playing 80 carries, and it gets pushed into the corner, suddenly you're fucked. Because now your melee units can't get to the crab. The crab is going to kill everything slowly one by one. And it seems like the mega crab will not be killed by any unit one-on-one. And it's going to take an army to get through it. So definitely something to keep in mind. Anyways, looking back into the game here, nothing has really changed too much. We are one off set 3. Once we hit the set 3 though, our board is actually super duper strong. But it's such an interesting board to be ending on. We're ending on like a Vi 3, we're ending on a set 3, and we're ending on a Pantheon 3. Also, just look at this fucking fight. Look at this fight. What an absurd fucking unit. 6 Mosher plus Hodge plus Gunblade. This Yorick is healing so much. It's actually insane. Also, the Evan Shroud onto the Pantheon was really great. Very prudent that we took it off of the neutrals from the Mega Crab round, right? Evan Shroud, I would argue, is like almost essential in this comp. I actually really like the idea of Evan Shroud on Poppy if you ever decide to run this line, just because you probably aren't going to be hitting this Pantheon 3 anytime soon. Well, I guess it depends, right? Pantheon 3 is fine as well, but Evan Shroud is so important in this comp because you need some way to get armor shred, and Evan Shroud is just the best way to do it. There's no great Last Whisper holders, so Evan Shroud on your main tank makes a lot of sense. Crown Guard off the carousel, nothing that great that we can take here. Probably Crown Guard onto the set, use the remover on the Poppy to get the redemption onto our set here, because this is probably going to be one of, if not the last fights of this game. But nonetheless, very interesting creative line here. Again, I really like the approach that Froden took here, and honestly, I cannot see how he bought. I don't see how he loses, to be completely honest. His board is so strong, but I guess it also depends on what everybody else's board is. This Urgotten guy is playing like a pretty interesting, like, what the Forge Crowd Diver reroll Katarina board, but look at this, it's like not even fucking close. But going into the last fight here, not really sure what we're rolling for here, to be honest, except for maybe just punk value. Just use up the rest of the gold that's in the tank just to try to get that extra little bit of damage. But it looks like we are playing into a 7 spell Weaver board, a pretty interesting vertical that actually got recently buffed in the new patch. It didn't get buffed too hard, but it did get buffed enough. But this Mahiru guy is actually playing, it looks like, damage Sona, which is really interesting. This is something that also got buffed as well in the patch, and wow, looks like it absolutely cleared his board, which is actually pretty interesting, but it looked like a little bit of fight RNG just didn't go his way. But nonetheless, six mosher vibe reroll. Like, what the fuck is this shit? Really interesting stuff to consider. Definitely a line I think it's going to be fun to try out, and if you have the line for it, I definitely think you can play it, but just keep in mind, it does seem like he did get bailed up a little bit by Yorick too, but nonetheless, still a very fun line to try out. Definitely something to keep in mind. Also, we didn't even play near Biss even close. We didn't get an Evan shot until very late. So there's a lot of things that could have been better this game. So I think this comp has a lot of potential to be a very strong meta contender. From what I can tell, it looks like maybe A tier, but it's very possible it could be a low S- tier depending on how things go. But anyways, thank you guys for watching. I hope this was helpful. Thank God we have a new patch, and I hope you guys enjoy the patch because God bless, it's been too long since we've had a real patch. We have had a shift in the meta. God bless, no more true damage spat. Anyways, take care guys, and happy climbing.